So we were farrowing the American guinea hogs. So basically, we had a boar, we had a couple of sows, and we had piglets. One of the things that I did learn there was, I lost a lot of baby piglets trying to control the environment during birth, right? Bringing them into a barn, etc. I found that just them birthing out on pasture, they did much better than whenever I brought them into the barn and tried to confine them. I had a lot fewer instances where the mother ended up laying on the piglets, right? Because you have a several 100-pound hog and you have this couple ounce piglet, and there's a lot of them, right? There's 8, 9, 10, and that sow gets up and gets lays down, etc. It happens, right? She's lays on some of her own piglets. That's just something that happens. And some hogs are better than others. Some sows are better than others about that. But I had that problem less frequently whenever I just let them farrow out on pasture. And so for us, in Texas, that's something you can do. In other environments, it may not make sense, especially in the winter.
This is the FarmHopLife podcast, a traveling homestead family. I'm Matt DeRosier. On the FarmHopLife podcast, we learn what it takes to grow your own food from everyday people. Could be a college student, grows tomatoes and salad greens on their apartment patio, a former VP of marketing for Del Taco now raising cattle in Montana, or someone who hasn't had a homestead in over 10 years. This show is aimed at teaching you what it takes to make homesteading work for you, that we all make mistakes, we all have bad days, but we can reach out and help one another thrive, and giving you the confidence needed to go feed yourself.
I don't think beef is the only protein, obviously. We raise beef, pork, chicken, lamb, and seasonally turkeys, and of course laying hens as well. And so, I want to bring more to the market space than just beef. Actually, I'm rather limited in the amount of beef that I can produce, and whereas pork and chicken are much more easy to scale, shorter cycle, takes less real estate. And so hoping to bring those aspects to the beef initiative. If customers are out there looking for beef, I'm hoping that they're also looking for pork and chicken.
Sure. Yeah, because you're in cattle country, I'm sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of beef around here. There's a lot of folks with much bigger operations than I am. And I am I'm selling my product at the local farmers market, and I pretty much that's pretty much all I can produce. So I don't do any shipping or anything like that. It's all direct to consumer sales at the local farmers market. So what Slim is doing, he's trying to connect, the farmer with the consumer, and I'm all for that. He's got a global reach, and obviously I can't support anything outside of my local geography. So, yeah,
and that's just fine
to scale up. But I don't think that shipping is an entirely additional enterprise, and it's just me and my wife. That's we manage everything. Plus, I have an off farm job, and so trying to take on something like that is probably not something that I'm wanting to do right now.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So I took a quick look at your website, and I actually don't like to do too much research because then I don't get to.
Yeah.
It kind of ruins my questions, actually, at least for me, anyways. But stepping back, maybe quite a few years. How did you get started in ranching? I'm going to call you rancher because it looks like you got some sizable property.
So I call it farmsteading.
Okay.
Which I don't know if there's really a definition for that, but really it's homesteading where you're trying to make some money off of your hobby, let's call it that, right? And so I did start homesteading in 2006, and we really did nothing but homesteading for 10 years. And so I had young kids then, et cetera, and we were bartering a little bit, and we were sharing with our local community. But really I did it out of a desire to feed my family. I like projects. I call myself a serial hobbyist, right? And so I like solving problems, and really like homesteading is the ultimate of that, right? You always are trying to optimize things, make things more efficient. I'm an engineer by training, and so this really kind of scratched a lot of those itches. And then when we moved, when the kids graduated high school and we moved back to Central Texas, just because we didn't like we were living about 20 miles from the Gulf Coast, just south of Houston. And so when we moved back to Central Texas, it was just me and my wife. We wanted to get a little bit more land, and we ended up getting a lot more land. And at that point, it was like, okay, let's just go all in. I'm a firm believer in having a second revenue stream, if you will. And so just kind of taking what we learned homesteading, what we learned with raising a whole plethora of different animals. We figured, look, let's turn this into a real operation and try to get our foot in the door at the local markets in and around Austin and try to make some money out of this gig. So I don't know if I answered what got me into it. What really got me into it was we were living in a suburb outside of Dallas, and it was very upscale. We lived on a golf course community, all that type of stuff. And I had 3 young kids at the time, all in like middle school, elementary school. And I just didn't like what I saw as far as how they were being raised, right? They were, or I guess the environment in which they were being raised, the keeping up with the Joneses, right? Ballet and karate and all of these things. Every moment of their day was kind of orchestrated, and they didn't really, they didn't have an opportunity to just go out and be kids and run around the block, right? It's just none of their peers were doing that. And so I guess the straw that broke the camel's back is, we lived on a golf course community. So there was, there's a lot of, there's like a little creek and ponds and stuff. And people would go feed the ducks there. And so the fish were always huge, right? And they would pretty much gobble up anything, right? So it's a kid's dream as far as going fishing. So we would take them fishing. I would take them fishing. They would have a blast, etc. And then, if they wanted to go fishing and I was busy with whatever, and I said, just go take your fishing poles and walk down there and go fishing. Well, about 3 weeks later, they had a big wrought iron fence up that said no fishing, right? And it's like, okay, so what are the kids supposed to do, right? And none of their friends were fishing like that. Maybe 1 or 2 others joined once they saw them. But again, it was like, okay, what are kids supposed to do? Do you want them to go sit on the corner and smoke cigarettes? You're not giving them many options, right? So Molly's dad and mom were living in Alvin, Texas, which is where we ended up moving to, and they had 3 acres, and the environment was just different, right? There was it rains a lot there, and I guess the thing, my great awakening was we went to visit one time, and there was about 6 or 7 kids riding 4-wheelers, and they had taken the hood of a car and they'd flipped it upside down and tied a rope to it. And they were basically surfing or skiing on mud with 4-wheelers. It's like, yeah, that's what kids should be doing. So it's at that point, it was like, yeah, this is really how I want to live. This is, these are the kind of people that I want to be around. And so we moved there and we started homesteading.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
The like people's progression is always interesting, right? Like you kind of like, there's something that kind of like starts to like get you like on that path, right? Then all of a sudden just like every little thing, it's like, man, I'm not too comfortable with that. And just like, man, you just get more and more uncomfortable where you are, knowing it's not the right fit anymore.
Right.
And so you're just looking for the next thing.
There was a couple of things that were just happening globally, kind of like now there's a lot of interest in homesteading because of the pandemic and the financial issues, et cetera. At the time, we were living, just before we moved to the suburb of Dallas, we were a couple hours outside of New York City when 9/11 happened. And then when we moved to the Houston area, the Hurricane Katrina had just happened. And so all of that was kind of fresh in people's memories. I don't know if people even remember that now, right? This is ancient history, really. But the reality is that there was a whole bunch of people who were totally unprepared to exist without the government's help. Let's just put it that way, right? And they had no means of an escape strategy, of any kind of redundancy, self-reliance. It was all just, the government's going to take care of me. And so a lot of those people ended up in Houston. So really, and then before that, even I was in Bosnia in 96. yeah, 96, 97, 98, that time frame. And, I saw how quickly society can fall apart.
Mm.
And so all of those things kind of impacted me, and having young kids, just the realization that, look, these things aren't always going to be there. You shouldn't depend upon them. You should always have a backup plan. Living on the Gulf Coast, hurricanes are a reality. It's just something you should be prepared for. The fact that the people in and around New Orleans weren't prepared for that is dumbfounding, right? And so, that was my excuse, if you will, to build a lot of these systems and build some redundancy and self-reliance. And really, that's what homesteading is all about, right?
I mean, really, yeah. That you kind of have to be handy. You have to be prepared. You have to kind of figure out how to fix things on the fly. So you're kind of,
Right.
exercising that part of your brain. What would I do if? Like, oh crap, I wasn't expecting that thing to break. How am I going to fix that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. And so even now, I wouldn't call myself a homesteader now, but I have to put systems in place that are redundant. So I travel some for work. My wife is here. She's got to be able to take care of these things when I'm gone. So and I'm not getting any younger, right? And so building systems that help make the job easier and manageable, and less prone to falling apart when I'm gone. Those are all part of the same skill sets that I use now.
Let's talk about some of your systems. So let's talk about a little bit about your property. So you said you have cows, pigs, sheep, and chickens,
Right.
and sometimes turkeys, like seasonally,
Right.
you said.
Yeah.
So do those on your property? I think I saw quickly you got like 70 acres outside of Austin somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. We have 70 acres. We lease it's about 18 acres adjacent to me, where I run the pigs and sheep half the time. And then I just closed on a 66-acre lease about 7 miles down the road. So that's going to help me expand my beef operation. Of course, it comes with a lot of additional infrastructure needs and logistics. But anyway, so yeah, so we practice rotational grazing of the cattle, and so having to put in electric high tensile electric fence, that enables rotational grazing on a more managed scale. And so that's one thing. We built our house here, and so I basically did all the construction myself. It's a metal building that we basically, once we had the slab poured, the metal building constructed, and then my wife and I, with my daughter's help, we built the inside of the house, framed it all in, and did all of that work. And so by having a blank slate like that, we were able to basically design the systems that we wanted from the ground up. So we have a rainwater collection system that goes into a cistern. That cistern provides water to my livestock, primarily my broiler chickens. We run batches of 300 broilers at a time out on pasture, and then also use that to water my orchard as needed. And then we put in a gray water collection system, and so all of the wastewater from the showers, the sinks, the washing machine, all that kind of feeds over into my orchard as well. And that water goes into the swales that we built for the trees in our orchard. And so that helps, it gets pretty dry and hot here in Texas in the summer. And so, we're putting that in place. Let me see what else. If you went to our website, you could see kind of how we do broiler operations. And so, we built chicken tractors that are easy to move, that my wife can move them every day. And so instead of one ginormous chicken tractor, we have 3 smaller ones. They're what are they? 12 by 10 with wheels on them, and so she can move those really easy across the pasture if I'm gone. And so things like that. Again, training the animals to this system is very important as well, right? Like my cows will come when I call them. We don't feed any grain to the cattle, and so just by calling here cow, they'll come running because they know by that sound that they're going to go get fresh grass, right? Same with the pigs, when I feed the pigs, etc. And so there's just little tricks and tips that you develop along the way that make life a lot easier. And of course, we're always building things, trying to improve systems, etc.
Man, just you touched on the rainwater, and that's been my the bane of my existence lately. Like the last couple of weeks, it's just been
Yeah.
raining and raining and raining here, and we just recently put gutters on the house, but nowhere to like put
Yeah, I
the
saw that.
water.
Yeah. Well, you got to
It's been a
start somewhere.
nightmare.
It's going to
Yeah,
rain again, and you'll have this, same issue next year and the year after. So, yeah,
yeah.
it helps. If you're starting from ground zero and you have a blank slate, I've been designing the house and the homestead probably for 5 years before we even bought the property. And
Mm.
so I had, we live in a very small, by today's standards, house. It's not even 1,600 square feet. But I, basically knew that I kind of wanted it to be very small, for tax reasons. Number one, number two,
Mm.
I
Okay.
don't,
Yep.
I don't need a formal dining room. I don't need a game room, all of these things. Right. And
Right.
so there was no reason to pay for it and air condition it and all those other things. So really
Clean
optimizing the
it.
design. Yeah, right. Clean it. Yeah. But to optimize the design of the house, I worked on it repeatedly and would pass it by the wife, and she's like, no, that's not going to work. We need to do this. And then I'd go back at it again and trying to squeeze it all into as small a space as possible. That, that proceeded over probably 5 or 6 years before we
Mm.
even bought the place. Didn't even know I wanted to move, right? It was just something that I knew one day that
Yep.
the kids were going to move out of the house. We were going to move to something smaller. And so, yeah, I started on that long before we even moved here.
Single story or multi-story?
It's a single story, but we have an apartment upstairs. And
Hmm.
so, if you're building a metal building, the beauty of the metal building construction is you don't have all of those obstructions in the attic, right? You don't have an attic. So there's no, rafters and joists, etc. And so by building, so we built a one-story structure in half of the metal building. The other half is my shop, which is wide open, all the way to the peak of the house. But in the other half above the house, I was going to build a commercial kitchen, so that I could, make sausages and cure meats, et cetera, et cetera. But then my son needed a place to stay. Him and his family, they were transitioning from Dallas down to here. So we kind of switched gears and we ended up building an apartment upstairs. So it's a 2-bedroom apartment, full kitchen, etc. It's probably about 900. Maybe it's 1,100. It's probably about 900 to 1,000 square feet. But it's pretty comfortable. And so,
Yeah, it's a small apartment. Yeah.
yeah, again, I just started out real small. We ended up, getting this place livable and continuing to work on it. And then a couple years later, we knew, when I designed the place, I knew I was going to have a kitchen upstairs. And so, I built the place with all the plumbing and electricity to understand that ultimately this is what I'm going to do. And then 2 or 3 years late after we moved in, we ended up finishing that space. So maybe we'll, use it as an Airbnb or something like that. Again,
Yeah.
multiple revenue streams, trying to generate as much as you can off of the place.
So it sounds like the planning and forethought years ahead of time is something that worked really well for you, because you kind of had a pretty good idea of what you want to do and how you wanted to do it before you even found the property that you're at now. And so you could just kind of take your design, like, yep, this maybe a few tweaks, but this property is exactly what we're looking for. And there it is.
Yeah. And I didn't, so when we got our homestead, south of Houston, I did have a metal building built just because I needed a workshop and an office as well. I was home officing, and I actually had my office desk underneath of a loft bed where my oldest son was sleeping. So I would get on conference calls at 7 o'clock in the morning, and he's still up there sleeping. And so that's That's not ideal. Let's just put it that way. And so we ended up having a metal building constructed. And then again, I finished that out on the inside and put a loft up above that. And so I kind of took that same concept and really just magnified it. It's like, okay, we can live in a metal building, because my office was in there. It's like, okay, all I got to do is expand this, right? And then I had also so when I was homesteading, I was processing all my own meats, right? And so we were butchering our own animals and curing and smoking, et cetera, et cetera. And so my office was very large. It was I guess it was 30 by 20. And so there was more than just an office, right? I had my gym in there. I had a little kitchen in there, so I kind of outfitted it. And so I knew when if we were going to, or once we did move, I knew that concept was advantageous for all of those reasons. Ultimately, I could turn what was an office, I could just let's just make that a house inside of a metal building. So really it was from that concept and execution that I got the idea that this is a great idea for a house, right? And then you can put an apartment upstairs, or in my case, a commercial kitchen, which was the initial plan. And so when we finally moved here, and it was just open land, they just had perimeter fencing. It's like, okay, well, let's just take that and and execute it here at this location. So while we were there, I was kind of already these ideas were germinating in my mind, and so then I started the design on what would be an acceptable house. Yeah.
Excellent. What are some other things that have worked well for you?
So for homesteading, we were raising, we had a lot of laying hens, so I implemented all of the permaculture tricks and tips, if you will, right? So we planted buckwheat and we had a little orchard. We planted buckwheat there, and the ducks and the geese and the chickens, they would harvest all of their own, not all of it, but they harvested the grain, etc. I had put in some different pumping mechanisms to aerate my pond and refill my pond. Lots of fun things like that. Here at this place, again, I touched on a couple of them. Just so I wouldn't say we're doing so much homesteading permaculture type stuff now. I did plant. So here, I had a garden we canned, et cetera, et cetera. Here, it's just me and my wife. We don't really need all that much. I don't eat that much vegetables anyway. And then if you have free range hens, having a garden is a challenge, right? Because the animals want to harvest things just moments before you do. Yeah. So you either got to fence the birds in, or you got to fence the garden in. And fencing a garden in creates a whole bunch of obstacles as well around, okay, how do I get my tractor in here? How do I do these things? And so we just trade meat for vegetables at the farmer's market. But here we have planted some trees. We have elderberry, we have asparagus, and we have a bunch of, just recently planted a bunch of pear trees, and then we had planted peach trees about 3 or 4 years ago. So, and then I've tried my hand at grapes. Texas isn't so great for growing grapes, but I thought, there's wild grapes that grow really well, and they're pretty good grapes. But I thought I would make my own wine at some point. And so I planted some wine grapes, most of which died. There's 2 still growing right now. But those are the ones that are hardy enough to survive here. So I'll probably take cuttings. Someday I'll take cuttings of those and finish out my vineyard, if you will. So.
Someday,
yeah.
So the grapes, what happened to the grapes? What do you think happened? Just too dry, or?
No, well, so there's a black mission grape that grows pretty well in Texas, and I think it might have been here back when the Spaniards came in. That's probably why it's called a black mission grape. But then I tried a couple of French grape varieties that we found at there's a couple of vineyards down by Fredericksburg, southwest of Austin. And they're growing those grapes. And so they were selling that style of grape. And I bought 3 or 4 different varieties. And at the same time, I bought some Black Mission grapes. I think those are the ones that all died, right? And so we have I think it's called Pierce disease, PIEC, RCE. Pierce, that exists in I think it's a virus that exists in the soil in a lot of places in Texas that kills these things off. So whether that was it or not, I don't know. They just didn't survive. But the black mission grapes that we have growing, they're doing really well. They're thriving. Now, I don't know what to do with them. So
because they're not the wine variety.
They are, yeah.
They are. Okay.
Wine out of them. Yeah. So they're not a really good table grape. So I've picked them and I put them in the freezer, and someday maybe I'll do something with them. I start a lot of projects. I get to about 80% proficiency, and then I move on to something else, right? It's like, okay, been there, done that. I can do that if I have to. And then I kind of go on to another project.
Yeah, I get the exact same way. Like, yeah. I'm sure everyone's tired of me posting about rocks, and like, well, that's kind of all I've been doing. I actually stopped recording myself like doing anything with rocks because like I'm bored of it. Like I hate this.
That's a very elaborate rock system that you put in place, that retaining wall and all. That was well executed too. It looks great.
Thanks. I hope it holds up over the years because it's kind of slapstick, but it's what I have. So
yeah.
I kind of thought about how I would mend it if it were to like start breaking, but that's not relevant here.
Yeah, I have this. It rains really hard here. We get like 3, 4 inch, 5 inch rain events that all happen inside of 4 or 5 hours, right? We just get these torrential downpours. And I have several areas that are suffering significant amount of erosion around this. So we have about a 2.5 acre pond. And then when all that water comes, it comes hard. And so I've been struggling with that. I've spent a lot of money and energy trying to keep this erosion at bay. And so that's been a big struggle. So I know your pain. Like I said, it's all been eroded away. So I'm taking a totally different approach now, trying to arrest that. And hopefully this one works. We'll see. I got a bulldozer a couple of months ago. I had to do a lot of work to get it working. But I'm going to try to redirect this water around the other side of the dam, and hopefully I do it correctly, and it doesn't erode that side of the dam, and then I can rebuild the side that is currently defunct.
So you're splitting it. So you're trying to cut off the one side that's eroded and have it go a different route where you can repair the first side, and then maybe just have it you're kind of like running something in parallel, just make 2 streams into the catchment instead of one.
Yes, in effect, right? So there's a spillway on one side, and that's the side that's been suffering a lot of erosion. It's probably eroded, vertically, probably 10 feet, and then horizontally, I would say about maybe 75 feet since we bought the place. Yeah, it's really bad. We have very sandy soil here.
Wow.
And it was all backfill. Oh, and it's like it's probably 30 feet wide. It's a lot of every time I see it pains me. Anyway, so
that's a lot of material.
Yeah. So I put a culvert in, and I filled in some of the erosion and put a culvert in, and effectively it just the culvert wasn't big enough, and even if it was, it started eroding behind the culvert, right? And I laid a bunch of cement bags down, thinking that would, when the water came through the culvert, that would dissipate some of the energy. It would provide, a stop for any type of erosion on the backside. Didn't work at all. We had a major rain event that went over the top of the culvert, and pretty much just took out all of that cement bags that I'd put down there. Several $100s and a hell of a lot of lifting. It's not easy moving an 80-pound bag of cement, right? Especially when you're going vertical. So I was carrying it down and stacking them up. I have pictures of this on our website. We publish a weekly newsletter, so if you go back through our newsletter archives, you'll see this project. Anyway, it was all trashed. It was
my gosh.
Destroyed. And so I think the only way I can fix this is to redirect the water to the other side of the dam, and then again, hopefully control the water, spread it out wide enough so it doesn't cut like it's cutting right now. So that's the plan. I'm working on that. I'm sure that'll be a topic of some of our newsletters and couple YouTube videos as well.
What are some other things that haven't worked well? Like, I'm sure, I mean, maybe you're the one rancher that has never had livestock get out of their fencing.
No, so I live on a pretty busy road, and that's the one thing that haunted me, especially initially. And I've had cattle. You know, when you take cattle to the butcher, you know, I only take 2 or 3 at a time, right? And so I put those 2 or 3 in a holding pen so that in the morning I can load them up. Yeah, you know, some of them are very docile, but some of them get freaked out when they're separated from the herd like that, right? And so I've had some jump the fence. I bought some from my father-in-law, who is a couple miles down the road. Brought those to our place, right? And they're like, "No, I'm not having this," right? And they jumped the fence, and I've lost some. I've had one that I've never recovered. Some rancher has them in his pasture somewhere. You know, that is a totally finished steer, probably worth $2,000, right? And it's gone. Never seen it again. I spent many a day searching for it, walked many a pastures looking for it, and yeah, don't have it. But really, you know, that doesn't happen all that much, and but it is something that is painful. With respect to cattle, you know, you think a cow is a cow, and we run a grain-free cattle operation, right? So it's grass-fed, grass-finished, and you know, I spent a lot of money on cows that don't perform well on our grass, and so you know, I didn't know anything about cattle. I'd had a couple of steers that I raised and butchered just for my family, and then we were feeding grain. But when we moved here, you know, I really liked the taste of grass-fed. We had sheep there that were grass-fed, right? And so I like lamb, I like venison, and so we wanted to do grass-fed beef. And you can hide a lot of bad genetics with grain, you know, finishing animals on grain, right? You can pump them full of a lot of calories, right? But cattle that consume grass, and you want them to get fat on grass, first off, you need really good grass, which we have mediocre grass. But you also need cattle that are really designed for that, right? Cattle that have very large stomachs that can consume a lot of calories with a lot of without expending a lot of energy. And more of your cattle genetics today, they're just not bred for that type of ecosystem, if you will, right? And of course, the heat here is incredible. Everybody likes Black Angus cattle. I think it's probably not a good fit for Texas. There's a reason that the early Texas ranchers, well, first off, there's the Longhorn, right? But also the Santa Gertrudis, which is a you know, not a heritage breed. It's a mutt, but it was bred to function in this type of environment, as well as the Beefmaster is a you know, it's got short horn and some Brahman in it, and so that type of cattle seems to perform better here, especially if you get the right genetics. So we bought a lot of cows and found out that those cows weren't very good, and you know, we had a couple of good ones that we kept, and we just kind of cycled through selecting better genetics, better performance, and so yeah, I spent a whole bunch of money because I didn't know what I was doing, and you know, and also a lot of time wasted, you know, trying to build a cattle herd that I could grass feed, grass finish, and so I'm still working on that too, and always trying to refine that and getting better genetics.
So what breed are you settled on right now?
Not a breed at all. I'm totally breed agnostic. I'm all about what cow performs well. And so if I was to do it again, I would probably look at something like Murray Greys, South Poles. These things are, you know, they're really good cattle for the type of operation that I have. I'm not advocating any particular cattle to anybody. I think everybody's, you know, situation is different. You know, the growing season that you have up there is totally different from mine, right? You don't have to struggle with heat like I have to struggle with, you know, if I had it to do over again, I would find a rancher who was raising, who had good cattle that performed well, and they didn't feed them grain, and I would pay the money to buy his good cattle, right? So, steal somebody else's genetics that's already proven, as opposed to trying to develop your own herd.
Sure.
And I still haven't done that, right? And so but basically, I've gotten a better eye for it, but I've pretty much been retaining my own heifers based on performance in my own herd, and slowly growing that away. Because good genetics are not cheap. You can go to the auction barn and you can buy a cow, but you're really rolling the dice. It's like playing roulette. Whereas if you and that's what I did. Whereas if you go find an operation similar to yours close to you, and you see that those cattle are doing extremely well on grass, then it's like, hey, I'll pay $500 over premium to get that genetics and save myself several years, because you don't know how it's going to perform. The cattle cycle is 3 years, really, right? If you get an open heifer, you're not going to know how that calf performed.
Sure.
3 years until 3 years later when you harvest it, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, because it's 9 months that the cow is pregnant, and then you got really 2 years before you're ready to harvest it, and that's a long cycle to try to improve off of bad genetics, right? And it's like, oh, well, that one didn't really work out well, and then it's like, okay, well, now you got to start again. You just lost 3 years. Plus the $1,500 that you paid for it. So I would have gladly paid $2,500, $3,000 for something that I wouldn't have had to waste 3 years on.
Yeah, that seems cheap.
Yeah. So I mean, any of you guys
in
listening
retrospect,
out there, any of you folks listening out there wanting to get into the cattle operation, find somebody who's doing it like you want to do it, and pay the money to get those genetics.
How about your pigs and your sheep? Because you said really those are more your specialty.
Well, I wouldn't say they're my specialty, but they're certainly they're easier to scale. And so I mentioned the time frame on cattle being 3 years. With sheep, it's more like it's about a year, maybe 18 months to finish, right? So it's half as long. And I raised sheep before, and so I had royal white sheep, which is kind of a mix between Katahdin and St. Croix, I think it is, yeah. And so I had those, and I knew I wanted hair sheep. Anybody familiar with sheep? Down here, wool sheep don't do very well. It's very hot, right? And I didn't want to shear sheep or any of that nonsense. So I had experience with royal whites and a couple of Dorpers. And so when we got the herd together here, we pretty much picked Dorpers because it's very prevalent. Hogs, when we were homesteading, we had American guinea hogs, which are a great homesteading hog, and but not a good commercial hog, right? It's you have a lot of fat. You have an animal. It's about 3/4 of the size, and they're great out on pasture, and they're really great for homesteading. But for us, knowing that we wanted to sell to local consumers, we needed a more efficient market hog, right? And so I had bought, so we were farrowing the American guinea hogs, so basically we had a boar, we had a couple of sows, and we had piglets. One of the things that I did learn there was, I lost a lot of baby piglets trying to control the environment during birth, right? Bringing them into a barn, etc. I found that just them birthing out on pasture, they did much better than whenever I brought them into the barn and tried to confine them. I had a lot fewer instances where the mother ended up laying on the piglets, right? Because you have a several 100-pound hog, and you have this couple ounce piglet, and there's a lot of them, right? There's 8, 9, 10, and that sow gets up and gets lays down, etc. It happens, right? She's lays on some of her own piglets. It's just something that happens. And some hogs are better than others. Some sows are better than others about that. But I had that problem less frequently whenever I just let them farrow out on pasture. And
Interesting.
so, yeah. And so for us, in Texas, that's something you can do. In other environments, it may not be, it may not make sense, especially in the winter, et cetera. So when we got here, we ended up buying some wiener pigs, right? Little 8-month-old, or I'm sorry, 8-week-old piglets, and raising them. So we went through a couple of varieties of those. We did the Gloucester Old Spot. We had some. I think we had a couple of Tamworth. We had a couple of blue butts, your typical market hog, if you will, which is across Hampshire and Yorkshire. And so we tried a bunch of different things. We kind of settled on red wattles, which is a pretty good fit for us because they do real well on pasture. They don't tear up the turf very much. So I'm not super happy with them. They have I would like something that has more meat, less fat. The red wattle is kind of a heritage breed that's not really genetically been refined over the years, like your Berkshires or your Yorkshires or your Hampshires, right? There's a reason that those are market hogs. It's because they produce a lot of meat in a short period of time. So I am trying to get some better genetics in there. I like the red wattle, so I'm going to keep red wattle sows, but I put on Duroc boars. Duroc are somewhat improved breed, and so I'm testing that out right now.
Sure. What about, have you looked into Mangalitsa at all?
Yeah, they again, there's a lot of fat.
That's true.
Not, when I say fat, I mean like lard, like back fat and belly fat, and that's fine. But most of my customers, they don't want to pay for all of that fat. And now I have 100 pounds of fat in my freezer. You can only render so much. You can only do so much with it. And the American Guinea, I'm sorry, yeah, the American Guinea hog, the has a lot. The red wattle has a little bit less, but still it's a lot. And the Manzanita, I think, is the same. So I do have some Manzanita bloodline in the one I have now. The boar that I had a little bit, because I could tell by the racing stripes on the piglet when it was born. So yeah. We'll see. I mean, it is again, for somebody living up north, I'm sure the woolly coat would add value just from keeping the pig cool, or warm rather, during the cool season. Here we don't have that problem, so I kind of think it would, it's kind of like that same thing with black cattle, right? It's like super hot already. Why do I want to add to that, right? And so why would I want a woolly pig?
Yeah, unless the hair acts as insulation in the summer as well. I don't know.
Yeah, whether that logic works out, I don't know. I'm not opposed to them. I haven't really. I just kind of steered away from them because, again, I'm trying to get something closer to a commercial hog that does well on grass. And so, yeah, I mean, if somebody's doing it well around here, I'd like to see it, and then maybe again I would incorporate that. And with pigs, it's pretty easy. You got for me, it's about an 8-month cycle from farrowing to finish. And then pigs get, maybe I guess it's about three months, almost 4 months gestation, right? And so in a year, you can change your program pretty easily, right? You can test something out, and then the next year you can make changes. Again, it's if you're homesteading, these, some of these things don't necessarily matter, but when you're trying to make money at it, then you need to continue to refine the system, I think.
Right. What's been the biggest challenge you've faced so far?
Probably my own stamina. Yeah, I'm 54 years old. When we moved to this property, the kids had just graduated. My daughter just graduated high school, and I looked at my wife. I was 48 at the time. Is that right? Yeah, 47, 48. I said, look, if we're going to do this, we need to do this now, because I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to do this. So from that perspective, I feel like time creeping in on me, right? it's pretty hot, and it's working by yourself is has its own challenges, and so just my own stamina. Fortunately, like I said, I have a lot of systems in place that I built initially when I still had a lot more energy. But yeah, I think that's the biggest challenge is really working by yourself. When you're moving cattle around, you need to be skilled at doing that without a lot of energy, without a lot of fuss. Building working chutes that enable you to sort, segregate, castrate, those type of things, all by myself, right? And so building the systems that help me do that makes it a little bit easier, but it's still a struggle. Yeah, having a good tractor, I would recommend folks get a tractor with a front end loader, and then get a front end loader that you can remove the bucket and put forks on. Forks on a tractor are a godsend. You can do a lot.
I can imagine.
Yeah, I mean, as far as taking pallets of feed off, you don't have to lift every single bag, right? You can just get in there with your forks and pick up the entire pallet, and then you can put it on the ground or whatever. So it makes a big difference, those types of things.
What's the best part about farmsteading?
I like the farmers market. I hate the farmers market, but I like the farmers market.
That's an interesting answer because I've never got that one before.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. Packing up, going there, and sometimes it's a lot of work with no return. If it's rainy or your customers are like at the end of the month, they just don't have any money, what have you. But I also like the interaction with the people. It's great to hear, customer feedback. It's great to educate customers about, what you do and how you do it. Them telling me how grateful they are that, some folks come with metabolic issues that, good clean meat has helped to remedy. We have farm tours and the kids come out and they get to interact, and those are the kind of things that really inspire me to keep going. And I think without that, it would just be a lot of work, right? I can only eat so much myself, right? And so by engaging in the agora, in the marketplace, with people who really want what I'm doing, that's a great blessing to me. So,
do you think everyone should be a homesteader, though?
I think everybody should have a homesteading mindset, right? So I think folks need to have skills that are traditional, right? Be able to, go out and go squirrel hunting, right? And know how to cook a squirrel if you needed to cook a squirrel. Not because you may have to kill a squirrel and eat a squirrel someday, but so that you have an appreciation for where your food comes from. I don't see any reason why folks shouldn't gain the skills to be able to, say, buy a whole chicken and then part that chicken out, right? So you can save a lot of money as a homemaker by not buying, skinless, boneless breasts, and then going and buying drumsticks for the kids or whatever. You can buy a whole chicken for a heck of a lot less, oftentimes on sale. And same thing with turkeys after Thanksgiving. Go buy 5 or 6 turkeys after Thanksgiving, and then learn how to process that down into smaller packages, right? And so I think things like that, everybody can grow a couple of, tomatoes or herbs even. And so it's just that mindset that it's like, I know I can do these things. And a lot of people say to themselves, I could do this if I have to do this. Well, you know what? When you have to do it, you don't have that skill. You're going to have to figure some things out, and there's no time to figure it out then. Practice it now, even if you only do it once or twice, and then put that on the shelf. Get your kids involved, help them understand, some of these more basic concepts about, life without the internet, let's call it that. And they'll enjoy it, right? If you make it a fun experience, there's no reason that they can't enjoy it. And then they'll also have an appreciation for where their food comes from, how to get water from point A to point B, all of these things, how to prune a tree, that type of stuff. And so, yeah, I think everybody should practice homesteading inside of the constraints that they have. So if you live in an apartment, maybe you're going to grow some herbs on your porch. But if you live in a subdivision, you could raise quail in your garage or basement, right? There's no reason that you rabbits are easy. You can do these things. You can always put a garden out there. You can plant a fruit tree instead of a Bradford pear or something like that. Something silly. Um, you can grow flowers, and then you can use those as gifts to somebody else, right? There's people appreciate handcrafted items like that. Yeah, so everybody can do this. Learn how to sew, learn how to quilt, all of these things. And it's great for community engagement too, right? You can get together with other people. You can trade things with other people. You can share tips and tricks. Like I said, get your kids involved, get your neighbors' kids involved. All of these things can focus around homesteading and add true value to their life, as opposed to I don't know what people do, watch football and drink beer on the weekend, right?
Right.
Yeah.
You saw a huge shift in 2020, people running to the countryside to go start a farm or a homestead or whatever. And then in 2021, a lot of people went right back. It's like, this is hard. Like, well, yeah, idiot.
Yeah.
You went too hard.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can't
That's another
go
thing.
0 to 60.
Yeah, I really recommend folks um, start out small, practice it where you're at now before you move out, and buy 70 acres. Matter of fact, I wouldn't recommend people buy 70 acres. 3 acres is a lot. And so, yeah, practice on 3 acres, 1 acre. If you're living in an apartment right now, start practicing now. And because, yeah, like you said, um, setting up systems wrong costs money and time. And so just by cutting your teeth on something smaller, you'll learn a lot. You'll gain the skills. The skills are non-perishable, right? And so you can then implement those as you upscale into something more remote and larger property.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that's helped avoid me and my wife from burnout is that we've been very slow to do anything here.
Mm-hmm.
Is that we didn't really get into gardening or homesteading or any of that until we uh built this house. We lived in an apartment for 3 years prior to this, but didn't really have like tomatoes on the patio or anything.
Mm-hmm.
We had our little garden when we first got here, and then the year after that had let's see, no, we had laying hens pretty close to that same year, and then meat chickens after that. And so we were slow, but we haven't branched into getting goats or sheep or whatever else we could have here, or even that much of a bigger garden. Just been very, very slow.
Yeah, you can,
just trying to establish things. It's tough starting from zero.
A garden is hard to maintain, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a lot of work just to maintain a small, 30 by 30 garden.
Fencing's expensive.
And you can grow a lot of stuff in a small garden if you're creative about it. I think most folks who put in a big garden, they don't utilize most of it, right? They're not very efficient with the land mass that they have. Whereas the smaller it is, you have to be very efficient and start crops at different periods of time and rotate through those. If you got to build soil, it's a lot easier to build a 20 by 20 patch of soil than it is to build an acre's worth of a garden, right? It's almost impossible to maintain. And then if you're weeding the dang thing, man, that's a massive chore trying to weed a acre-sized garden. So yeah, definitely start out small. Undertake one enterprise at a time, and again, get fairly comfortable with it. Like you said, you start with laying hens, maybe you move to broilers, and then a year later, then you might get a one sheep or goat, maybe 2, right, to keep it company. But don't go out and buy 25 of them because you don't know what your handling systems need to look like, right? You got to practice with a couple of them because again, you're gonna have to work with these animals, right? And so building an elaborate system that doesn't work is very painful because then you're stuck with it or the expense of having made a mistake. So yeah, start small, walk into it, or crawl before you walk, before you run, and eventually, then you can upscale that and get more animals, and then get another variety of animals and keep adding to it.
I got one last question here as we wrap up. How do you end up turning your passions into profit?
So again, I think homesteading is great, but I think also everybody who's homesteading should have an outlet to sell their product, and the farmers markets are great for that. We have my wife runs a farmers market here in our community, um, and so you can go there even if you're selling bread or macrame or candles or whatever the thing is. Um, so first off, it helps you pay for your hobbies, right?
Yep.
If you do it right and you upscale it, it's also a great tax write-off, right? And so you can hide a lot of your living expenses, if you will, or your hobby expenses and some of your property. If you need a tractor or whatever, you can write these things off and not have to carry all of that cost. You can liquidate some of that through tax depreciation, right? And so
Sure.
I don't see there's a reason why you wouldn't take advantage of those. Of course, you have to generate revenue to be able to write those things off.
Yeah.
And so therefore you need to turn those passions into profits. And so even if you start out small, you should start designing your homestead with that idea in mind. And I also think it's great for um, to develop these entrepreneurial skills in kids. Give them something to do, right? And so if you're going to go to the farmers market and you're going to sell bread, give your kids, let your kids make jewelry or candles or what have you, right? And let them sell them too, because then their hard work is rewarded, right? And they get a taste for that. And then that taste kind of like, becomes its own engine in and of itself. And then they start having all kinds of creative ideas on how they can make money. And I think that's the heart of capitalism right there, right? And that also gets them involved and gets them off the couch, stop playing video games because you can't make any money playing video games, right? And so then they start going to the library and they start learning about different crafts and skills and things like that. It's a great thing to do, not only for your own pocketbook and to fund your hobbies, but it's also great for building that same kind of mindset in your kids and your neighbors too.
One thing that I think also helps you be successful is having multiple facets. So like you're not just selling beef, you're not just selling pork, you're not just selling lamb. Like you have this whole spectrum of products that you offer, because we like we sell a couple, like maybe a dozen eggs or two every week to some neighbors, but for the most part nobody cares because that's all that we have.
Mm-hmm.
Like if we had some vegetables, if we had some meat birds, if we had some lamb to buy, probably the eggs would be like an upsell, right? It wouldn't be the thing.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to raise, let's say you raise 25 broiler chickens for your family, right? One every other week or something, or why not raise 50 and sell 25 of them to somebody in your church or
Right.
whatever. It doesn't take that any more effort really to do that. Maybe a little bit to process them, maybe a little bit of larger infrastructure, but I just really, your time is the same. And it would effectively, if you sold those 25 chickens, you would pay for the 25 that you're putting in your freezer, right? And so why not do that? And then, from the concept of multiple enterprises at once, from my perspective, if I'm going to go to the farmer's market and I'm going to engage a customer who's buying meat, I want to be their one-stop shop, right? I know people who eat beef, likely they also eat pork and chicken and lamb, right? And so, or vice versa, if they're buying lamb, maybe I can sell them some beef or some pork. And so you want to maximize that opportunity that you have in front of your customers. And then these systems kind of work with one another, right? There's advantages of running sheep and cattle together. There's advantages of having pigs out on pasture, as far as building soil, that type of thing. Running broilers with chicken tractors builds fertility in the soil as well. And so you can capitalize on these things to where they're additive in your homesteading or farmsteading systems.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, John, was there anything else that you wanted to touch on before we sign off here?
No, I don't think so. I think been a good evening, and I hope folks follow us on our newsletter. Sign up for our weekly newsletter if you're interested. It's amberoaksranch.com. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter as well. And wish everybody the best of luck. If anybody has any questions, you can reach me off of my website. I'm always willing and excited to provide information to folks about anything that we're doing here or any ideas that they may have, and they just want to bounce them off of somebody. So I look forward to it.
Appreciate it, and appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
All right. Take care, man.
One last real quick question.
Yeah.
Your logo, is that like a little like wink wink?
Yeah, it's a little wink wink.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, it's Amber Oaks Ranch, right? And so just the A and the O. If you look at it close, it's an A and an O. And if you look at
That's all it is.
and if you look at it a little sideways, maybe you can see more there.
All right. That's cool. I like it. I love that. Awesome. Well, again, thanks, John.
All right. Take care, man.
I am Matt DeRozier of Farm Hop Life. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and visit farmhoplife.com.
Inside of the city, the people are crazy. Out of their minds, they ain't got a clue. We gone away, headed west for Montana. Left family and friends, all I got now is you. We both got new jobs, a house and a homestead, thinking this was the life, all that there'd be. After our firstborn, you had to stay home. That's when the work got in the way for me. Well, I started Farm Hop Life. We'll come to your farm to help and to wander. Me and the family, a truck and an RV. Send us a message and